America is a big problem for the global establishment. That problem lies in how ideas are transmitted from person to person. In the past, as recently as 20 years ago, if you wanted to communicate to millions of people, you had to own a multi-million-dollar corporation. Now all you have to do is own a cell phone. What this has done is it's cross-pollinated everyone's culture so that we can weed out all the bad philosophical ideas and replace them with good ones. This is a problem for the establishment because there are many people out there who make a lot of money on bad or predatory ideas. Recently, I've been seeing examples of the way ideas spread from different cultures through a culture that's interesting to me, which is Japan. A while ago, a podcast done by 3 foreigners who live in Japan called Trash Taste gave some criticisms in response to their experiences of living in Japan. This was then shown to a handful of Japanese people by a Japanese YouTuber named Yuta. Let's start with the comments from the original podcast.
So in Japan, right, whenever you sign up to a bank account, in most countries that I know, you get a fucking debit card.
Oh yeah, you do. This is so
yeah. So in most other countries, you get a debit card in which you can spend your money, which you put in your bank. In Japan, they're like, we do not do that here. Yeah. They will give you a cash card, in which you can take out money at the ATM, and also charge you a fee for taking money out of the ATM.
By the way, you can't pay with anything with the cash card. This cash card can only be used to take out cash from ATMs.
Yes.
You also can't take out any money with your debit card. Debit card can only be used to pay with things.
Yes.
Yeah.
A lot of times people don't question things because that's the way they've always been. It really puts a wrench in the system when a foreigner comes along and points out how stupid an idea is. Especially something like getting charged to take out your own money that you loan to the bank for free. Banks don't loan money for free. They charge people interest when they give people money, and they make an insane amount of cash by doing that. So why do they have to charge you to take out your own money at the bank? Here's how the Japanese people responded.
そこに疑問を感じたことはありますか？
あります。自分のお金を引き出すのになぜ手数料を取られなければいけないのかという率直な疑問はあります。
手数料が一番いらんと思う。ATM から自分の金引き出すのに手数料取られるのマジで意味がわからない。
それこそ日本のことしか知らないんで、カードってそういうもんなんやって思ってました。
If you're a bank, this conversation is dangerous. Not only are people saying it's stupid to require 2 cards to do something that banks in Western countries allow you to do with 1 card, but Japanese people think it's nonsense that they are being charged to take out their own money. That conversation could destroy a revenue stream for Japanese banks, and it should because what those banks are doing is nonsense. This is like what happened with cell phone companies in America. You used to get charged like 25 cents per text, even though it cost the phone company way less than just 1 cent to send a message. Then one company started offering free texting to get business, and all the other cell phone companies had to stop scamming their customers by vastly overcharging them. Imagine how mad Japanese banks would be if everyone started saying it was stupid that they were being charged to use the bank's ATM. Then, all a new bank would have to do to gain a massive amount of business is say, we don't charge you to withdraw money. All it takes to get rid of a policy like that is for a single detractor to say, hey, this is dumb, and for people to respond, you're right, that is dumb. As crazy as this might sound, it really just takes enough people to disagree with a bad idea, and the bad idea goes away. Take a look.
Hanko basically is like the Japanese equivalent of a signature, but incredibly tedious.
It's incredibly tedious because that means you have to carry your hanko everywhere.
Yeah.
Whenever you're like, if you forget your
if you forget moments where I'm like, I have everything except the hanko, and they just don't accept it.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, this is a stamp I bought at Don Quixote for like the most accepted like excuse, I guess. I'm just gonna call it an excuse. As why they don't use signatures. They were like, well, anyone can copy a signature. Anyone can go to Don Quixote and buy a $2 stamp.
I can see where Japan is coming from on this one, but I can also see where this is stupid. If you can go to the dollar store, buy a stamp, and have that count on an official document, then it really doesn't make sense to require the inconvenience of having to carry a stamp everywhere.
いやもう全く同感です。仕事でハンコがないと通らない書類があったりするんですけど、全く無意味と思ってます。
それ言われてみればめんどくさいし。
ハンコ文化は別に
いらんな。
確かに遠出した時とかに、仕事とかでやべハンコ忘れたっつって100均に行ってシャチャッと買ってきてみたいなことがあるんですけど、確かにそれはめんどくさいですね。 でも最近は結構サインで済むものも増えてきたんで。
There is a counter argument to this, which is that you can get a personalized stamp from a specialty shop that you then register with your local government. Those are much harder to replicate, but imagine you work an office job where you have to stamp documents all the time. If you forget your stamp at home, that ruins your whole day. It's much easier to just go with something that you always have with you, like a handwritten signature, and Japan is largely moving in that direction. Look at this article. Fukuoka became the first stamp-free city. Once people see the success of that, other cities will copy Fukuoka, and over time, stamp-free cities will become normal. Now, obviously, these two things aren't super consequential. Maybe the banking thing is a bigger deal than the stamp thing, but the reason why these examples are important is because the process used to change ideas here can also be used to solve more serious problems. Look at this article from the NHK. NHK is like Japan's PBS or BBC. Now, you might look at this on screen and say, I can't read that. Don't worry, I've got your back. The title says roughly, school teachers still work a lot of overtime. And next, I believe in quotations, it says, we also don't get breaks. The article goes on to say a bunch of things in Japanese that I have translated for you here. The basic idea of the article is that Japanese teachers work an insane amount of overtime. The highest number was from middle school teachers saying that in a month, they worked an average of 120 hours and 12 minutes of overtime. That's like 3 full American work weeks of extra hours in a month. The low numbers weren't any better at roughly 2 40-hour work weeks of overtime in a single month. Even worse, Japanese teachers are only getting between 10 and 15 minutes per day of break time. Not only is that ridiculous and terrible for people's mental health, but people work way less efficiently when they aren't given adequate time off. There's a philosophical concept called diminishing returns, meaning that up to a certain point, the more effort you put into something, the less return on investment you get. For example, let's say you're a farmer and your job is to pick apples. For the first 8 hours, you are able to pick 500 apples in an hour. By hour 10, you are so tired that you can only pick 200 apples in an hour, and by hour 12, you can only pick 75 apples. Then you have to factor in how tired you are from the previous day, so during day 2 of apple farming, your first hour may only yield 300 apples. This doesn't just lower your efficiency. Working 16-hour days will also result in a lower quality product. Here's the thing though, if this is how it's always been in Japan, they'll just see it as normal. That's one of the tragedies of abusive households as well. They don't see the abusive behavior as a problem. It takes an outside influence to point out the horror of their reality. In terms of Japan, suicide rates are incredibly high. Teaching isn't the only Japanese industry where people are overworked. How many people are losing their lives simply because they work way too many hours with no breaks and no time off? How many productive hours are they losing because people are overworked? Then we take this further than Japan. What happens when we look at countries who suffer under extreme authoritarianism and they get exposed to American ideas? What happens when they learn about free speech? As far as I'm aware, that idea does not exist outside of America. Everywhere else, you can go to jail if you say the wrong combination of words. Certainly, jailing people for words is becoming more and more of a big deal in places like Canada and England. What happens when people learn about due process, the right to know your accuser, and innocent until proven guilty? Not just innocent until proven guilty, but innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Meaning, they have to be 95% sure that you are guilty if they are going to put you in a jail cell. You can't be convicted just because someone thinks you are guilty. They have to prove it. Do you have any idea how many places there are in the world where people are subject to witch hunts? Witch hunts used to be the norm. We are very lucky to have the system that we have. Last, what if people in oppressive places heard about the right to know what crime you're being charged with when you are imprisoned? In America, it's unlawful to imprison someone without telling them why they're there. I certainly wish that was the case on YouTube, but all they do with creators when they give us a strike is send us an FAQ sheet and tell us to guess. Wouldn't it be nice to know what YouTube is accusing us of? Did you know that tons of people sacrificed their lives and shed blood so that we could have these simple rights in America? Our ancestors died so that you could have these freedoms, and so many people are just throwing them away because someone got offended. Bringing this back home a bit, we are already seeing the next wave of the spread of better ideas in America. COVID has done a lot of negative things, but there have also been some benefits to the current political climate. Listen to Dr. K talk about it.
And so this is another thing that corporations have benefited a lot from, which is like, preying essentially on ignorance. So like if my workers don't know what else is out there, I can give them crappy things. So in general, like I think, for example, the quality of food has thankfully in restaurants, like generally speaking, improved over the course of my life. And why is that? It's because now I have so much access to information about where I can get food and where there's good food and where there's bad food. As we sort of discover there are better restaurants and worse restaurants, like better companies and worse companies, people have started gravitating towards the better companies and moving away from the worse companies.
Right. Knowledge is power, and simply knowing that there are better options out there is a huge deal. I mean, how many people are there who don't know that asking for a raise is one of the least effective ways to make more money? The most effective way to make more money is get a job, build skill at that job, and continually interview for different companies who are willing to pay you more when you're skilled enough. If you want to make what you're worth, don't stop going to interviews just because you got a job. You need to keep interviewing until you get the right job. There are a lot of companies out there who don't want you knowing how many better places there are to work than them. Fortunately, the internet has made those options available. Here's something else that the internet does.
So for a long time, companies have sort of assumed or believed or taught their employees to believe that particular things were true. The first is that you have to be at the office to work, right? And so what companies would do is like there's so much crap that people had to put up with, like commuting is the top of the list, right? Where like you had to commute, like a commute was a given. So the other thing that corporations tended to take advantage of was almost like geographical predation, where like, in the past, your job options were restricted by your geography. My only options for work were like what was like available around me. And so with the advent of the internet, and especially with COVID and work from home, you're no longer geographically restricted.
This is something that will fundamentally change the world, and I'm surprised that it didn't happen back in like 2005. Virtual office space and email have been a thing for like 2 decades. At a ton of companies, there is no reason to have to go to the office every day. We don't like banks, right? Imagine what that does to the real estate market when I don't have to spend $3,000 a month to live in a New York basement just so I can work a decent job. Imagine what that does for my personal freedom to be able to divert the money I was spending on ridiculous real estate prices to something more useful like an emergency fund or investments. Do you know how much economic freedom that will give people? Do you know how much extra free time not having to commute will give people? This was my major problem with college. I spent so much time in traffic that I could have gotten all my day's work done just in the time it took me to drive to and from school. This is how powerful ideas can be, and it's why every authoritarian right now is trying to use big tech to stop the spread of these ideas. If they survive in a single country, it will kill authoritarianism everywhere else, because the lifeblood of authoritarianism is an ignorant populace. The lifeblood of abusive people is their victims not knowing that there are better options. In fact, one of the first things that abusers do is convince their victims that they are worthless so they don't go looking for those better options. Tell me, does that sound like a familiar strategy? That's why communication is so important, and it's why becoming an effective communicator is so crucial. You can literally save lives if you are simply good at saying words the right way. Good communication always starts with you investing time into the person you're talking to, learning what their problems are, and talking to them about how what you have to say gets them what they want. It's really that simple. You just have to recognize that other people are separate entities with their own thoughts, desires, and fears. If you understand that, instead of thinking that everyone thinks exactly like you do, all other communication skills become apparent and easy to figure out. Anyway, that's enough for this video. Subscribe to me on Odysee. Donation links are in the description if you want to support my channel. Thanks for watching.